Radiohead tier list. We're starting with Pablo Honey. I'd like to just quickly say that in order to make this tier list work, I have to rank things lower than I really feel about them. So I'm gonna put Radiohead or Pablo Honey, that is, in the D tier. I do not think this album is bad. Okay, just to be clear. But when I'm thinking about the overall Radiohead discography, not only is this definitely the weakest record, but this also just stands out the least. It is the most un-Radiohead album, and it's the least worth listening to. It really has actually, honestly, almost nothing worth listening to about it. I think a C tier is a more like reasonable thing because again, this album isn't bad, but we're doing this just for the sake of the tier list. Okay, it's not a bad record. It's like it has Creep on it, right? And Creep's a great song, and it was a great first single for them, and it definitely launched them into stardom, which allowed them to do what they did later. But aside from that, as an album, this feels like an album built around a single. Like there's one strong lead single here, and the rest of the tracks are really dull, really lame. There are a lot of stupid choruses on this, pretty lackluster production, boring riffs, boring songwriting. It's very weak. There really aren't any great qualities about this album at all. Even Tom's singing on this album is sometimes a little bit iffy. It just doesn't really have anything to it that you can really say is exceptional, aside from the song Creep. You know, it's fine. Like it's a listenable album, but it's just very dull. And it doesn't really stand out in any way. And so it's going in the D. The Benz is going in the A tier for me. This is one of my favorites from Radiohead, to be honest, and I like it more than a lot of their albums, in truth. I mean, I think that it is a fantastic alt-rock record, poppy alt-rock record, radio-friendly alt-rock record, which is what it is, and it's amazing at being that. There are so many incredible ballads and great rock songs on here, and if you like the rock side of Radiohead, this is really the album you want to go to, because it's going to give you that in the best way. Pablo Honey definitely won't. But there's tons of great hooks on here, amazing songs. I mean, High and Dry, Fake Plastic Trees, Planet Telex, the title track, Fade Out, Street Spirit. I mean, that song, really tells you what Radiohead will be after this point. It definitely goes a lot farther than Pablo Honey does in just being a more versatile, interesting, well-written album. Much better lyrics, interesting lyrics in general, much sadder sound, just more of a mood and a tone, and it's just leagues and bounds above Pablo Honey for me. I really, really like this album. I don't want to make it sound in any way like I don't love this album, because this is definitely one of my favorites from the band. So I'm definitely giving it an A tier. OK Computer is going in the S tier, obviously. I don't even know what I can add to this album at this point. But OK Computer really is one of the most perfect, adventurous albums in alt-rock music. This album pushed alt-rock forward into a place that maybe it ended up coasting out on for too long. I think alt-rock became a boring mid-tempo genre in part because of OK Computer. And that does suck, but it's not Radiohead's fault. The chilly, isolating, mid-tempo sound of OK Computer was there for a purpose. It complemented the themes of social alienation and technological alienation, which are things that we still grapple with to this day. It definitely is of its time, and I think the lyrics reflect a time when those sorts of things were becoming apparent that they would be a problem and would continue to be a problem, but I think we're in a much different place now, and everything's gotten much worse. Every single song is an amazingly satisfying, adventurous, beautiful track. And something I love about each song on this album is that even though they are all mostly at this mid-tempo range, every song has these highly lifting, satisfying moments in them, no matter how subtle, but every track goes somewhere at some point, Subterranean Homesick Alien with that amazing chorus, exit music for a film with the most obvious climax of the record, and you have like the ending of Climbing Up the Walls, the chorus of Lucky, the chorus of The Tourist, Paranoid Android, that middle rock section leading into the finale, the chilly guitar all over Airbag. There's so many like unique and interesting sonic elements worked into these songs. And it's not to say that it's the most adventurous album of all time. A lot of it really are ballads at the end of the day, but they do so much to spice them up sonically and make them sound better. And the production is amazing. And I mean, everything about this album is amazing. It's an album that just never personally gets old for me. An album that I can listen to endlessly. And I know a lot of people don't feel that way. They feel like this album's been talked about to death and that it just doesn't really have the same staying power. But for me, I could listen to this on endless repeat and not get tired of it. So I'm putting it in the S tier. Kid A, I am also going to put in the S tier. Kid A does an amazing job of expanding upon, I think, the isolation that Radiohead wanted to build in OK Computer. But it does so through its sound even more than OK Computer does. Stripping everything away into these electronic landscapes inspired by many other electronic artists to this point. But to do it in the context of a band, of a rock band, a popular alt-rock band with several like radio hits, as Radiohead had, is undeniably an incredibly bold and risky move that they took here. This is one of their most experimental records, and it is so in the best possible way because every single experiment goes over well. Just such a wide range of influences too. It's not just electronic music, it's also stuff like krautrock and even some prog. I mean, I can hear that in here. And they do all this while retaining just an incredible like mastery of mood. It's another just incredibly sad and lonely, isolating record, a very cold album, and it does so in a way that few bands can ever match. So many amazing tracks here. I mean, everything in its right place, the title track, How to Disappear Completely, the national anthem. I mean, I love Tree Fingers, the ambient interlude. I love motion picture soundtrack, Idiot Tech. I mean, the whole track list is phenomenal. This is a beautiful record. It stands right up there with OK Computer, another one of the greatest albums ever made, but you probably already knew that. We'll move on to Amnesiac, which I'm putting in the B tier. I like Amnesiac quite a bit, but I think that it's definitely quite a little ways down from Kid A for me. A lot of people will talk about it in the same breath as Kid A because it clearly did come out of the same sessions. I think it does a good enough job of furthering the sound of Kid A, and honestly, this album can be even stranger. Actually, it's generally much stranger than Kid A. It goes even farther with some of that stuff. A lot of these songs are almost like unfinished ideas, but like in a good way. Like it is quite messy. Some of these tracks don't progress all too much, but they're uniquely weird and uniquely almost demo quality in a way that enhances the overall feel of the album. You know, I think the first half of this record is very strong. The second half has some pretty weak tracks, though. This has tracks like Pyramid Song on it, and Packed Like Sardines, and a Crushed Tin Can, Crushed Tin Box, or whatever. Life in a Glass House. These are up there as some of my favorite Radiohead tracks, but then there are definitely quite a number of tracks that are kind of misses. It's still a very strong album, but I just think it's below everything that we've talked about in the last three albums. Next up is Hail to the Thief, which I'm going to put in the C tier. Like, this is an album that I can listen to and just forget every single note of. It's solid enough, you know. It has good tracks on it. It's an enjoyable listen when it's on, but it's just such a forgettable, unmemorable record for them. It really did nothing to enhance or further their sound in any way. It sets you up in the beginning to expect them to blend their earlier rock sound with their new found electronic sound on the amazing track 2 + 2 = 5, which is one of my favorite Radiohead tracks, but the rest of this album just fails to deliver on that promise in every single way. It's not really that great. Really, outside of 2 + 2 = 5, I can't think of any top tier Radiohead tracks. It just doesn't really compare with the stuff that came before it. It's okay. It's okay. You know, it's a fine album. And it has a cool album art, so you gotta give it that. Next up is In Rainbows, which I'm gonna put again in the B tier. In Rainbows, I think, did an amazing job at revitalizing the band and also revitalizing everybody's love for them, which is not to say that people didn't like Hail to the Thief, but I think In Rainbows, you know, stands up for a lot of people as one of the greatest Radiohead albums. For many people, this is their favorite, which is very understandable. You can hear a lot more influences from like indie and stuff on this record, which is really cool. And I think this definitely does a better job at blending their rock sound with their electronic sound than Hail to the Thief does. There are tracks on here that sound like expansions upon some of the things they were doing on Hail to the Thief, but they definitely do it in a better way. The production on this album is near perfect. I just don't like the way the drums sound. I think they're too dry for me, and they just don't fit too well on some of these tracks, but the mixing is truly, truly astonishing. Some of their best tracks definitely do land on here, like All I Need, Weird Fishes, Body Snatchers. There are some fantastic tracks in this album, but for me, the second half of this record is pretty weak at points. I'm not necessarily enamored with the sound they went for in Rainbows. It doesn't have a lot of my favorite songs. Like, I've never really been a big fan of Reckoner or House of Cards or Faustarp, and all those songs are back to back, which kind of adds to a pretty dull section of the record for me. There are a lot of really amazing attributes of In Rainbows as well, so I don't mean to discount it too much. I'm just trying to justify why I have it in B, because I know people aren't going to necessarily like that too much. Next up is The King of Limbs, which I will put in C. I think The King of Limbs has some very strong tracks, and it has a really good idea, a very good sonic concept to it, but they don't really deliver very well on it. It's a pretty dull record overall. It's okay. I don't think this album is bad. And I think there are some very good tracks. I really like Bloom. I think Bloom does the whole like sampled sound that they're going for here, where they're like sampling their own sounds and stuff and building them up into strange sort of weird grooves. That song does it the best. There are some tracks here though that are just really fucking weak, and songs where it feels like they did not know what the hell to do with them. It is not a great album, but it's fine. It's fine. I can appreciate the experiment here, and I think some tracks do go over well. I don't think the album is bad, but it's the weakest of every album after Pablo Honey. I think that's definitely the case. Next up is A Moon-Shaped Pool, which I'm gonna again put in the B. I would have to think on this one as to where I would rank it among these, but I'll put it in the middle for now. There are a lot of beautiful tracks in this album. It was really cool to be a Radiohead fan when this album dropped. I would love to hear a new Radiohead album any day now, you know, I really would. There are tons of beautiful, expressive, highly emotional tracks in this record, like Daydreaming, Glass Eyes, True Love Waits, right, I almost forgot the title. Hearing them finally do a full version of Burn the Witch was really cool when that came out with that amazing music video. Daydreaming had an amazing music video. There were good music videos for this album too, which is pretty sick. This was a very strong album with some great production. I loved the strings. I loved the more Baroque sound. I mean, not Baroque, but chamber sound of the album. It coasts a little bit in some tracks on that sound a little too much, to the point where the songs don't really stand out to me a lot of the time. There are a number of songs here that, you know, don't rank among my favorite Radiohead tracks, and there are definitely some weaker tracks. It's a little bit of an inconsistent record with it. I could say it's better than In Rainbows for me. I could say it's a little bit weaker than In Rainbows. It might be tied. I'd have to think about it. But this was a very, very good album that I really, really enjoyed. I very much enjoy everything in the B. I think these are all great. And that's my Radiohead tier list. So thanks for watching. I will see you next time.